This is Bonnie in context. We're going to go over every single aspect of Bonnie's kit, how it relates to other brawlers that we already have in game, so you know exactly how good she's going to be. In her cannon form, Bonnie shoots one projectile that's one tile wide, and she only has one ammo stored up at any given time. These are all exactly the same things that B has the capability of doing. Their stats are actually fairly similar as well. B is going to have a slightly longer range. I don't think that's going to impact too much though, but then on the other hand, Bonnie does have a faster projectile speed, so it's going to be a bit easier to aim your shots and hit your opponents with Bonnie than you would with B. Now, in terms of damage, Bonnie doesn't have a charged shot or anything like that B has, so she doesn't have the potential to output a ton of DPS, but her normal attack does do more damage than B's normal attack. So depending on how many charged shots you normally hit with B, you might be doing a similar amount of damage to Bonnie. Actually, if you hit 1 in every 5 shots as a charged shot, you're going to be doing basically the exact same amount of damage per shot as you would be doing with Bonnie. B is able to charge her super slightly faster than Bonnie with just 3 shots, whereas Bonnie takes a full 4 shots. So it really doesn't take much for either of them, but it will feel a bit longer for Bonnie. Now you might think that B and Bonnie sound pretty similar, which they are, except I forgot to mention that Bonnie has over twice the health of B. She is going to be one of the tankiest brawlers in the game when she is in her cannon form, and that's all on top of a kit that's very similar to another brawler we have in game. Obviously, she doesn't have the slow effects or anything like that B does, but she still does pretty good damage overall. And they have basically the same reload speed, so it's not like one's going to be able to output damage a lot faster than the other. It would only be if you can hit a ton of charge shots in a row with B that you would be able to do a lot more damage. Bonnie does have the slight drawback of having slower movement speed, but since you're at long range, it's not going to be as impactful. You'll probably just take a lot more damage, but I think that's okay given that you have over twice the health as B does. But then once you charge up your super, you get another ability which lets you have an El Primo-like jump onto whoever you want. You can launch yourself up to 7 tiles and you do 1,650 damage when you land. Now that's a bit shorter than the range of El Primo's super, but if you have the star power that increases your range, suddenly you have more range than El Primo's super. But even though there is a slight range difference, you're doing a lot more damage on landing than you would with El Primo's super. You don't get the pushback though, which is a fairly important consideration. Once you super out of the cannon though, you just turn into the normal body form where you throw 3 bombs. Where you throw 3 bombs at a time, spread out over a thin angle, and each of the bombs is going to do a very small area damage. You might notice that this is exactly what Bo's attack does. The main difference though is that Bonnie has a significantly reduced range. So Bo is a fairly long range brawler and can deal with long range opponents. Bonnie, on the other hand, only has 5 tiles of range and is really going to need to get close to opponents in order to actually deal with them. So you have to play her like a glass cannon, because that's what she is. She has fairly low health, especially compared to a brawler like Bo, who doesn't even need to get in close in the first place. And so it's going to be very easy to die quickly with her. She's probably one of the only brawlers in the game that has a short range and a low amount of health in that form. So a lot of times I think you're going to have to play her like a glass cannon. Just jump on someone, get as much damage as you can, and then if you die, you die. Hopefully you can get some value out of it. But unless there's some walls around that you can hide behind, it is going to be difficult to stay alive with her since you need to be so close to enemies in order to actually deal damage. But going back to the Bo comparison, she shoots 3 shots, right? Each of them do a little bit more damage than Bo actually, and Bo already has pretty solid DPS. So at close range, Bonnie is going to shred through her opponents. She does have a slightly slower reload than Bo in this form, but since a lot of times I think you just want to jump on people with 3 ammo, I don't think it's going to have too much of a big impact. But just keep in mind that after that first volley of attacks, she's not going to be able to continue to output that same DPS very quickly. So basically, to summarize, where we are now is that she's a super tanky B to start out with, who doesn't have any of her charged shots or slows. And then she can use an El Primo super, basically. And then when she lands, she'll be a nerfed range, but higher DPS Bo. And then when she's in that form, she auto-charges her super to go back into her cannon form, which takes 16.7 seconds, which is just about half the reload time of someone like Edgar or Daryl, who auto-charges their super. But that's honestly a long amount of time for how little health she has and how aggressive she probably will be when she's just sort of jumping on someone by using the super to get out of her cannon. It's possible you can just sort of play very safe and hide behind a wall until you can go back to your cannon form if you don't want to play that aggressive, but 16 seconds is a long time, for sure. It doesn't sound like much, but in-game, so much can happen in that amount of time. But when she does charge up her super and she uses it, she'll transform back into her cannon, and it takes a half a second for her to do that, which is actually half the time that Meg takes. She takes a full second. So Meg, a lot of the times you have to be very careful where you're using your super to transform into your mecha, because it's really easy to get interrupted. But with Bonnie, it's a bit less of a concern just because you transform so quickly. But you still can be interrupted, so just be wary of that. And that, I believe, is Bonnie in context.